Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Fit Mess Podcast. Today we're going to talk about some topics that many of us grapple with, but not many of us actually discuss openly. I'm talking about body image, self-acceptance, and grief. In just a few minutes, we'll talk with fellow podcaster Matt Gilhooly. He runs the Life Shift podcast. He's going to share his lifelong struggle with body shame and his current journey through the heart-wrenching process of grief that he's dealing with. I believe you'll find his raw honesty about hiding behind hoodies and battling self-doubt will really resonate with you or anyone who's ever felt uncomfortable in their own skin. This isn't just a conversation about personal struggles. It's a powerful reminder of the strength that comes from vulnerability, the connections we forge when we open up, and the healing that can occur when we share our stories. So whether you've faced similar challenges or know somebody who has, this episode promises insights that will stay with you long after you've finished listening. So settle in and prepare for conversation that might just change the way you see yourself and others.
But first, this is the Fit Mess, where together we learn to develop habits that help us live beyond our mental health struggles to create happier, healthier lives.
He's Zach. He lives in the future with his anxiety.
He's Jeremy, and he lives in the past with his depression. And we get together once a week in the present to share the obstacles we face and how we overcome them.
And just a quick note before we actually get into the interview, the audio may sound a little funky. Life gets messy sometimes, and in this case, it did, so I had to record this interview from my car. Luckily, I let Matt do most of the talking, I hope, so I appreciate you forgiving the audio quality of my voice in order to hear the power in Matt's message.
The reason we're having this conversation is, for one, we connected a while back. You had me on your show. I'm very grateful for that. But I follow what you post online, and I am always amazed at how open and vulnerable you are about everything, about the show, about your life, about your pains and your struggles. There's one that you wrote recently that I could have written. And if you don't mind, I'll read it. You just said, if you see me in a hoodie, there's a deeper reason than to keep warm. We keep the house cold so I can wear a hoodie because a hoodie keeps me covered up and hidden. I've gone through waves of body shame since I was 12 or so and bullied for being overweight. I was bullied about my body by kids and adults that I so desperately wanted to like me. Nowadays, it comes and goes. When I'm not at my fittest, I feel a sense of disgust when I look in the mirror. It's not rational, I understand, but it's real. The hoodies feel like protection. I can hide parts of me that I struggle so much to like at all phases. I'm currently in one of those phases, so until I figure it out, you'll probably see me in a hoodie. And then you ask for people to share if that resonates with them. I live in hoodies for this very reason. I almost wore one today in solidarity, but I was like, it's too hot. I will just be dying in this thing. But man, when I read that, I was like, I know exactly what that feels like to feel like you need to hide. It sounds like you've won and lost battles with weight in your life. Talk me through where you were when you wrote that and what's going on with you.
Yeah, it has been a lifelong battle, I think. You know, when I was a kid, my mom died, and I don't want to blame everything on that, but I think it was part of me wanted everyone to like me at that point. I didn't want people to leave, and I needed to impress people. And I think what came with that was this obsessive control. And at the time, 90s, I feel like 90s, everyone was, the perfection was all in the magazines. It wasn't social media. It was more like what you saw on TV and what you saw in the magazines. And I was never that. And at one point, when I was a kid, adults and people around me were just bullying me for just being overweight. And I think maybe food was my comfort. I don't know. Yeah. Sometimes I just want to eat all the food, and sometimes I don't. And sometimes I can be really controlled. But in this most recent moment, I'm in this phase in my 40s now where being fit is harder. And I hear you would talk about this all the time. And just I know how to do it. I know how to go to the gym. I know how to work out. I know how to eat properly. But sometimes I just can't, because it's going to pull me into an eating disorder again, or it's going to pull me here, and I'm trying to find this grace within myself. But at the same time, I realize that I'm always in a hoodie, whether it's hot, whether it's cold.
Yeah.
And it's just because if not, I'm going to walk in front of a mirror and then I'm going to shame myself and be ugh, why did you eat that today instead of eating this? And so that's where I was. And I feel like I'm still in that space. And at the end of the day, it's okay. But, like I have to honor the fact that that's just how I feel right now. And I don't know how I'm going to get out of it.
Yeah.
But, shaming myself for shaming myself is just not like the way that I want to go.
It's interesting. I was talking to my co-host, Zach, who's usually here, and he's in a similar spot right now where, the routine's fallen off, all the things, everything feels like it's a mess. Everything's in chaos. To some degree, I'm dealing with that. I've had some injuries and some stuff that have thrown me off, and I'm still just eating like like the dumpster in the back of a 7-Eleven, just like emotionally eating whatever's in front of me, put it in my face. So I can definitely relate to that. I'm curious about the weight loss.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how much weight you lost in your journey.
I mean, it's been up, down, all around. When I was about 12 was probably, this weirdly, my biggest. And I was like 5 feet tall and 165 pounds or so. And that was when like adults were like, oh, you're fat. Like here. And that's like the first jumping into Slim Fast and jumping into like just not eating and just really poor nutrition, just like moving through the world in just like a not healthy state. And that kind of went on until like up and down, just like the whole calorie counting. And then it became this obsessive thing. And like, how low could you actually go while still eating? And it became unhealthy. So in my 30s, I like got a trainer. I got like the macros. I figured all that stuff out. And for like 2.5 years straight, it was like no cheating, down to the exact macros every single day. But I got like, the desired 6-pack, and I got the fitness that like I never could have imagined. Right. But it was so much work, and it was so much harder to keep it up than it was to once you started falling off. And like, am I ever going to get back there? And I feel like that was almost a detriment. Getting that fit now is like, why can't you get back there? So that becomes part of the cycle now too, is like, well, your body can clearly do it.
Right.
But you're not doing it.
Yeah. During those phases, when you look in the mirror, do you still see do you still see the heavier version? Even when you were jacked, when you had the body you always dreamed of having, did you still see the one you were trying to fix?
I don't necessarily think I saw like the fat kid anymore, but I did see the flaws. I did see where I wasn't yet, to the point where I think somewhere in that journey, I started as a vegetarian when I was in that journey, and I got down to 122 pounds at like 5'7". Wow. I was eating 2,200 calories a day, but my body needed like meat protein. It needed all the amino acids. It needed all those pieces. And so, but even at 122 and like uncomfortably getting into a size like 26 pant and having it be loose.
Yeah.
I still saw like, oh, well, like, what is this? When really it was probably skin or, whatever it was.
Right.
So I didn't necessarily see the fat kid, but I saw the flaws. I saw like where I wasn't yet. And now I look back and I'm like, ooh, probably should have eaten more. Like I probably should have done all these other things. Right. But in the moment, there's a lot of like self-hate kind of things that just kind of bubble up always.
Yeah. I'm at a weird place where, despite being far from where I would like to be, I've developed more self-compassion and patience with myself than I ever thought possible. And I'm at a point where I can look in the mirror, not be happy with what's there, but know that I know how to fix it and just need to do the, especially when I'm doing the work. I can be like, I can allow this because this is part of it. I'm on my way. But, when I'm grabbing more crackers out of the pantry, it's a little bit harder to be kind to myself. How do you cope with this now? So, I mean, obviously you're hiding with the hoodie. Is this still kind of a daily situation for you?
I would say that I'm like partway to your journey of trying to show compassion and trying to, what I don't want to be is obsessive controlling, because I know my tendencies will get to an eating or disordered eating. I won't necessarily say an eating disorder, but I would get to a point where I was controlling everything. Yeah. And that's not healthy either. And I know that for myself. So I'm trying to find this way where, find the clothes that you feel comfortable in, honor yourself and know that you are still going to the gym 5 days a week. You are still, generally eating properly, maybe a couple Oreos here and there that are extra.
Right.
But I think I'm on that road to self-compassion. I don't think I'm there yet. Obviously,
Yeah.
I still feel the need to hide, or there's always like, I don't know if you do this too, sit on the couch and like want to hold a pillow, or you want to hold like a blanket over you or
Hide,
something.
yes. Yep.
And I don't know if that's just 40 years of doing it, or if it's something where I'm trying to protect myself. But the goal is to find this balance zone where I'm not out of shape. I don't think I'm out of shape right now.
Right.
I'm just not in the shape that I know I can be. And sometimes the work that I put in the gym doesn't feel like it's visible.
Yeah.
So,
I
that's
would say
frustrating
always.
too.
I would say the work in the gym always feels like it's not visible, no matter how hard you work.
Right.
It's never
because
enough.
food's the hardest part. I mean, food is truly the hardest part. And having such a trauma as a child, a lot of my comfort came from the adults around me. Like, here's extra dessert, we want you to be happy. And so I kind of just gravitate towards sweets and snacks and things like that. I'm not like, oh, I can't wait to have a bag of broccoli right now.
Right. I wrestle with that as a parent. I've got a 13 and now a 9-year-old daughter, and it's so easy to reward with ice cream, reward with dessert, reward with some sort of food, because that's what they like. They're kids, right? They want to eat sweet things. But every time I do it, I'm just like, what am I building in their brain that tells them when you're good, you can put all the junk in your face? Like, it's such a hard thing. I know I learned it as a kid. I'm sure I'm passing it on to my kids in some way. And it's something that is constantly haunting me, that I need to figure out what is a better reward system, because they'll ask, when they do well, can we go to Dairy Queen? Can we go get the pizza? And if I say no, then I'm punishing them for wanting what they want as their reward. It's a tricky thing to reward yourself properly in a way that honors what your body needs, but also rewards that part of your brain that wants the cookie.
Well, and also just, I think, when we grew up in the 80s and 90s, the portion control was totally different. Like, we didn't have the awareness, I think. It was just like, you had to clear your plate, or you couldn't get up from the table. You had to, if you wanted seconds, you better finish the seconds. There was a lot of that. And I feel like we were just conditioned. And so I can imagine kind of trying not to pass that off. But also, if you're like, oh, well, you can only have one cookie, then is there some kind of absorption of shame that comes with well, what happens if I have two?
Right, totally.
I don't envy you. I don't have kids, so.
I also just wanted to say that I think it's very brave of you, not only to, share so much of what you do publicly, but as a man to talk about body shame. That's not something that men do often. Like I said, I relate to it very closely. And one of the ways that I think I've been either developing my compassion or just getting more comfortable in my own imperfect skin is I've been cold plunging for years, but I recently joined a group that does it together every Sunday morning. And there are some people there that are absolutely jacked and older than me, and I hate them for it. There are people that are in worse shape than me, like, seemingly from the outside. But taking my shirt off in front of other people has never been something that I look forward to. Okay. But the sort of the exposure therapy of it, like not only of the cold, but of the, hey, everyone, here I am in all of my imperfection, and having nobody ever say anything about it, because ultimately nobody cares, right? Like, we think people are disgusted by what they see, and, oh, this poor person has to look at me. But all of them are so wrapped up in what do they think of me that, it doesn't really matter. And so it's been an interesting experiment for me to put myself through that exposure therapy of like, if I do this, are they still going to like me? Are we still going to be able to do this? Or am I going to be banned? And as it turns out, nobody gives a shit.
No. Well, and I think it's the same thing as what I do. I try to put my imperfections online for a couple of reasons. Selfishly, I think it helps me get it out of my head, and it's a lot less scarier. I mean, it's a lot less scary when it's just like not in my head. Yeah. And also, to your point, like, I can't be the only one feeling this way. Like, even if I'm a guy and I shouldn't feel this way, guess what? Yeah. I'm a human and I do feel this way. And it's not like reserved for women or men, or it's just a human experience, and we absorb what we absorb and manifest in different ways. But I've always been, well, no, I've tried to be in my adult life since I've kind of gone through therapy and whatnot. I feel like it's important for me to put those things out there because, I mean, to your point, you saw it and you kind of felt seen in a way like, oh, I do that too. So maybe it's not like totally weird, or maybe I shouldn't be ashamed of it, or, you know, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
I just feel like we're going to connect more if we kind of share the valleys of our lives more so than like, hey, I just won this award, or I can't relate to that.
Yeah. All of that has been proven over and over again to just make us all feel much worse about ourselves because we're not always on the mountaintop like everyone seems to be.
Right. And they're not either.
Right.
You know, they have their bad moments. They might have a terrible life, right? But they're just trying to show you the shiny parts. And I used to be that way, and it's a lot harder to be that way. I think it's harder to exist in the world as that all the time.
Yeah. One of the pains you've been sharing recently, I also relate to. I just published an episode a couple weeks ago where I was kind of struggling with mortality and the meaning of it all and the purpose and all of that. And I know you're going through a struggle that many of us have been through with your dog. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what's going on?
Sure. Yeah. He's Mikey he's about 14 and a half, and I got him when I was 29. And so it feels like I've grown up with this dog. And in the last probably like 6 weeks or so, he's starting to show his decline, and I'm really struggling. Like, I lost my mom suddenly. I watched my grandmother die, and I was super close with her. This is really hard in a different way that I didn't expect and I think it's because I can't have the conversation. I can't, you know, talk to him and have him respond and how he's feeling. And is he really in pain? Is he sticking around just for me? And so all these things are kind of just going through my body, and I've shed so many tears, and he's still here, you know, and just thinking about having to make a decision. And I love what you said, or what your vet told you, is like, better a month too early than a minute too late. And so that's really like swimming around in my head because, you know, I sit here and I'm like, am I keeping him around because, like, selfishly I need him here? Is he enjoying his life? Is that painful? Like, what is he doing? And so it's been quite a journey. The last couple of weeks have really escalated, if you will. So I've brought some friends over to say their goodbyes, and just in case we have to make the call sooner rather than later. But I never, ever imagined that this would be as hard as it is. But I guess it's part of life too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, grief in general, when you have so much time to pre-grieve and be in it, it's agonizing because especially if it's a pet, like you said, because they can't communicate what they need. You have to sort of interpret based on their behaviors. My first dog that I got as an adult lived for 14-ish years. And for the last couple of them, his back legs didn't work very well, but his body, the rest of him and his mind, he was in it, living life, still trying to chase Frisbees with the 2 legs that worked. And I wrestled with that same thing. Like, is this a fair life for him to have half a body that works? And at the end, I mean, I still remember the night before we said goodbye to him, laying with him on the floor and just feeling his fur because I knew I wouldn't again, you know, much longer. And it was the hardest thing. And in his situation, his entire body was giving out to the point where, like, he, you know, was losing control of his bowels and things. And I remember talking to the vet, and he was just like, and at a point he did and still just laid in it. And I remember talking to the vet at that point, and he said, even a paralyzed dog will find a way to get away from their own mess.
Right.
So I think it's probably time. And that was when he did suggest, like, you don't want to be a minute late on this. Like, you don't want to wake up and find him there, having him gone on his own alone. Right. Like, how is that going to make you feel? That sucks for him. And it still haunts me. Like, losing him, I lost a cat literally on the way to the emergency hospital, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It never, there's never anything good about it other than on the other side, that twisted relief that comes from knowing they're at peace now. Like, they're not hurting it.
I'm sorry that you had to go through that. I don't want to get to that either, you know, like it just feels like, but then I'm like, am I not giving him a chance? And now he's got a dementia type thing going on where he will pace for 5 hours at a time, forgets to lay down, gets stuck in corners. I think it hurts maybe to go from standing to laying down, so I have to physically like lay him down. But then when it's food time, he's like so excited about eating. Or when it's time to go out for a walk, even though he can't really walk, he's so excited. So we go, you know, just a couple steps. So I'm in this space where I think the time is coming soon and I hate it. But to your point, I know that, you know, it's kind of the right thing to do, and I can't be selfish about it. And I have to think about him and whether or not, you know, is he enjoying 20 of the hours a day or not? And so it sucks. But, you know, people are like, he'll tell you. And I'm like, I don't understand that. I don't know what you mean. But maybe I had that conversation this weekend.
Yeah. And I do think, just based on my experience, there's absolutely no literature that I'm referring to in this, but in my experience with a cat, it's very obvious. They'll do things like basically live in their litter box. Like, you'll look for them and they're just sitting in it. You're like, okay, you even think it's time for you to go. Like, I get it. Where that, you know, a dog, they'll be like, pardon the pun, dead asleep, and you have to like shake them to see if they're even alive. But then, you know, offer to take them for a walk or chase a frisbee, and boom, they're back in those little glimpses of the dog they used to be. Make the decision so hard, and it's all on you. You know, and there is no right time other than when it's just, you know, either too late or just painfully obvious that they're suffering.
Yeah. You know, but I think, how lucky are we to love something so much that we have to grapple over this and not just like dismiss, oh, well, you know, that's not what it is. And so I look at that, I try to honor that as well. And you've seen in this last couple weeks journey, I'm just like telling people, just like, this is the worst thing that I've gone through recently. And I don't know how to handle it. And I think that's okay, because none of us really do. We're just trying to figure it out. But in the sense of, it helps me to put that out loud, but also I think other people might feel that same way. And so maybe if they read it, they don't feel, I don't know, maybe I'm just make myself feel better by saying that. But I do try to think about other people when I do post my vulnerabilities as well.
Yeah. And I think that's super important that more of us need to do. And I think that, you know, between all the things we talked about here with grief and body shame and all this stuff, like, if there's a takeaway from our, you know, sharing this conversation, it is asking for help, putting out there your struggles, because there's so many, especially, I mean, again, we try to target guys and we end up getting a lot of their wives and girlfriends to listen to the show because they're trying to figure out what's up with guys. But
we don't share enough.
Because we don't share enough. And that's the thing, like, whatever you're going through, whatever body shame, grief, career struggle, relationship struggle, keeping that stuff inside, having that one-way conversation doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't invite your God, your universe, whatever you subscribe to. It doesn't invite those solutions to come into your life. It just takes up space in your head and in your heart and eats away at you.
Right.
And
it doesn't make you stronger either.
No, we have this false belief as guys growing up that you bottle it up, you put it on a shelf, and that's where it lives until you die.
Right, and you're looked at as strong.
Yeah, tough guy. You can do it. Look at you. You never cry. And that's just not the human experience. I mean, and if it is for you, listener, and that's how you're getting by, you know, I'm not here to tell you that you're living your life wrong, but I will tell you that when I have put out into the world that I need something, the world delivers in one way or another. The more that I talk about my feelings, the more I process them openly. You know, I don't have to get on the internet and process my feelings. I can do it with my wife or my friend or my therapist. Working with that stuff, getting it out, just makes you lighter, makes you freer. It allows you to show up better for yourself and for the people around you, because you're not carrying all that baggage into every situation in your life. So I would hope that, this conversation was helpful for you, Matt. I know it's helpful for me to have these conversations. But I hope that for the people listening, that they can just hear the message of ask for help, put out there your struggles, share, because you're going to find other people going through the same thing, and it's just going to help you find the answers that you're looking for by bouncing the crowd in your head over and over.
And I also just think that it builds connections more so, because now you have more things that you can relate to with other people, even if they're tough things. I think there's value in that. And so I would add to that not only is it going to help you, but I think it's going to build more connections to other people in the world.
All right. Well, Matt, thank you so much for sharing openly and vulnerably here, as you do on your social media accounts and you do on your podcast. Tell folks where we can hear you and your show.
Sure. Yeah. Check out the Life Shift podcast. It is, I think I'm 140 something episodes now, so I'm chasing you guys to see if I can ever catch up. But on the show, I have candid conversations with people about the life-changing moments in their lives. And so I had opportunity to talk to you as well. So they should start with your episode, I think would probably be the best. So I'll give you the link to that and you guys can put it in the show notes to check out the Life Shift podcast.
That's where you'll find that in the show notes for this episode. Matt, thanks again for your time. Best of luck with your dog.
Thank you.
Rough seas ahead, but I know you'll get through it. It seems as though you have a good support system, and I hope they're there for you. And if there's anything I can do, feel free to reach out.
I appreciate you. Thank you for just wanting to talk about this. I think it's super important that we put it more out in the public.
I agree. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, my thanks to Matt Gilhooly for sharing all of that very vulnerable, powerful message with us here on the show today. You can find the episode of his show that I appeared on by visiting the show notes for our episode at thefitmess.com. And I appreciate you sticking around all the way through here to the end of this episode. If you did find value in this conversation, please do share this with somebody who would benefit from it. Visit our website today, thefitmess.com. Hit that share button and share this episode with anybody who you think may, again, benefit from hearing this conversation. Thank you so much for your time and for helping spread the word about our show. We will be back next week with a new episode at thefitmess.com. Thanks for listening.
We know this podcast is amazing and it doesn't seem to lack anything, but we need a legal disclaimer. Prior to implementing anything discussed in this podcast, it is your responsibility to conduct your own research and consult your physician. You should assume that Jeremy and Zach don't know what they're talking about, and they're not liable for any physical or emotional issues that occur directly or indirectly from listening to this podcast.